So the first question I wanted to ask you, Hamilton, just kind of lay some groundwork, because, the word shaman's used a lot today, but like a lot of words, it's kind of losing its meaning. And I think it means something different to everybody, like God does. So with that in mind, I wondered if you could give us what your, shall we say, definition is of what a shaman is, but what shamanism is, and why shaman have been very important to native tribes throughout antiquity. So what is shamanism? What is a shaman? And why have shaman been so important to native tribes throughout history?
Yeah, shamanism is fundamentally a primordial science. It's what came before science, and also what came before religions. And it's a practice of moving into other states of consciousness, fundamentally for the understanding of facts and the expression of them in a form of typically mythology that explains a greater context to what's going on, both for the people involved and typically the shaman's society or tribe. And so the idea of shamanism is really a field of study that goes back tens of thousands of years or longer to the very first origins of exploration about consciousness, spirit, which is a way of talking about the life force, animism, and just energy force of the universe, and ultimately higher dimensional states of consciousness, and this intersection of the individual, this greater mystical context, and what can be discovered or found, which would be right out of any other understanding of discovery. And the practice of shamanism is vast. There's so many different kinds depending on the culture, but they all have something unique in common, which is the movement into a state that could be called other. There's a different state that is acquired, some kind of trance state, theta state, dream state, ecstatic state, etc., that an individual can go into. And what's unique about it is that they come back out of that state into an ability to converse with and communicate with their society, bringing back invaluable information, something very unique, purposeful, of great importance, either a kind of technology, a kind of healing, a kind of medicine, or a kind of answer for the need of that society. And that's kind of unique to shamanic cultures and ubiquitous across the planet. And so that's sort of shamanism. And a shaman is an individual who has been steeped in the arts of shamanism, who has studied and learned and trained within those arts, typically either directly from spirit, directly from nature, or under the tutelage of a lineage. So where it gets passed down from, one generation to the next. And then those people are trained in the enculturalization, the understandings, the techniques, and the practices that ultimately convert them from kind of what you would think of as like normal person, not having these extraordinary experiences, to someone who's very proficient in having these extraordinary experiences and who can typically do it at will for the need of themselves and the tribe or their society. And those people are both medicine people, so they're like doctors of their tribes. And you have to think, going way back in prehistory, this is where there are no other kinds of doctors. These are the only doctors. They use all different kinds of plants and really kind of essential elements from the earth, like different kinds of animal parts and different kinds of plant matter to be able to make medicines. They go into these altered states of consciousness. In them, they can wield energies and vibrations and higher dimensional states, which are actually scientifically provable. They're facts. And in doing so, they can enact massive change to themselves, the individuals around them, and the environment. And they've played a primordial role in the development of humans and the development of human society and human civilization. And to the day, they still exist all over the world. And in places like where I live in the Amazon, they are actually in a very important part and a very highly respected part of the society. And so they're revered for their role in society and the unique benefits that they can provide. And that even includes societies now that have Western medicine. So they're seen as having a unique importance and a unique perspective and understanding. They have a unique form of knowledge that has been unbroken, passed down now for thousands of years. And they have an ability to impart that knowledge and wisdom, both for the healing purposes and for guidance and teaching. And they have a high level of respect. What was the third category?
The third was why have they been so important to native tribes throughout antiquity?
Yeah, and they're
But
important.
I think you've kind of covered that.
I kind of covered it. Yeah, the importance is that they're a unique person within the tribe that can fundamentally guide and support the tribe in all aspects, including political aspects. And many times the shamans were also the chiefs of the tribe.
Right. And it's also interesting, too, because, you know, in my studies, sometimes a shaman would be a medicine man, but often in tribes they had a medicine man and a shaman. And the medicine men were more along the lines, I think, of a combination of an osteopathic or a naturopathic physician and a bone setter, but more oriented toward knowledge of plants and making, healing medicines for things like wounds and illnesses of various types. But the shaman seems to be the one throughout history that had the capacity to communicate with other dimensions and other beings more so than an earth-orientated practice of a medicine man. Is that something you would agree with?
Yeah, I do. I think that you'll see now in cultures where there's a mix of those. But like, for instance, down here in the Amazon, they have your sobadora or your sobador, and that's a person who's the bone setter. And then they have the equivalent of like the person who sells or knows how to make poultices and tinctures and things like that. And then you have your medico vegetalista or your shaman, which is a person who wields a kind of medicine that comes from those higher dimensional states or uses visionary plants. They have a unique connection with the universe, source, God, divinity, light, the creative elements of the world. And they seem to have an ability to tap into extraordinary or miraculous kinds of understandings that we describe as higher dimensional states.
Yeah. Some of the couple of notes I wrote just while you were talking there is in my, Joseph, I don't know if have you ever seen the books Joseph Campbell's written that have a lot on shamanism?
Yeah.
I've got the really big ones, the very beautiful, high gloss, kind of like coffee table style, very expensive, but very beautiful. But he has a lot on shamanism in those books. I think there's 3 of them. And I've studied those. And he and others, I've got a lot of books on shamanism in my library, probably, 70 of them. But there's a number of my books that show hunting maps where the shaman would go into a trance state, communicate with the spirit of the buffalo, the elk, the deer, whatever they were hunting. And the shaman would draw the hunters a map as to where to go to find the animals. And lo and behold, they were right consistently. I don't know how many times they weren't right, but the researchers that I've looked into and the shaman that have written about it and the writings that we have today show quite clear evidence that they were able to essentially remote view and then tell the hunters where to go and what kind of an animal would greet them there. And they were able to do that quite consistently, which is quite interesting because really that's remote viewing. And then it seems to me that even though Buddha is often considered to be the first psychologist or psychiatrist, it seems the shaman were actually the first psychiatrists.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. Early in my training, when I first got into the Amazon and I was with both shaman and locals, and, you have to feed yourself out there off the land. They looked at me like, what do we do with this kid? I was in my early 20s and only knew how to go to a supermarket. And so the very first thing they had me do was diet a plant that is supposed to help you both align with nature and be good for hunting. And through my first dieta experience in the Amazon, I gained those skills and had those awakenings. And after the first 2 or 3 months, I felt so aligned with the forest and so akin to the elements of nature that we could go into vision, we could go into a ceremony and know exactly what we would see the next day or where different animals would be and go and meet them. And I used to take tourists out in canoes and get a really clear understanding that 3 turns upriver on the right, you would see woolly monkey, and certainly 3 turns up right, there would be the woolly monkey, or over on the left will be toucans, and you could see them. That's a feat that is ubiquitous in shamanism around the world, to be so connected with the animal spirits that they talk to you and they let you know where they are. Another feat that comes through in that sense is that when you do dieta in the Amazon, you're only allowed to eat 2 different kinds of river fish. And there's hundreds of species of river fish. And so you actually have to call to those fish in water that you cannot see into, and actually like commune with them to come and be the fish, or you don't eat. So you have to literally catch those, and they have to sacrifice themselves or give themselves to your dieta to be able to eat. And you have to provide your own food during dieta. And that was something that I had to do over my first 5 years of training. And so I relate, incredibly to that. And in terms of the nature of psychology, I think the first people to start to understand the mind, the imagination, and the core codes of that were the shaman. And, they mapped it. They fundamentally mapped the nature of those codes. They gave and ascribed meaning to the symbols that they could work with, which was typically the archetypal meanings or the animalistic meanings. They would provide extraordinary meaning to that, like bear means this and wolf means that and crow means this. And they were able to draw out very clear maps of psychology, psychiatry, treatments for it, and deep core understanding of how mythology forms that in the culture.